Amid the vast emptiness of the Pacific, a small coral atoll became a living hell. Wake Island. 15 days of desperate defiance against an entire empire. After the staggering blow at Pearl Harbor, America seemed to be on its knees. Yet on this isolated speck of land, a few hundred Marines and civilian workers wrote the first chapter of resistance, a story of courage, strategy, and tragedy. This was not merely a forgotten battle. It was the place where the spirit of a nation began to rise from the smoke and fire. Heat. Heat. The opening words crackle through the air, dry and tense, like the breath of war about to erupt. December 1941. The Pacific Ocean turns into a sea of fire. After the devastating blow at Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Empire does not stop. It surges forward, sweeping across islands, bases, and coral reefs. Amid this boundless ocean lies an almost nameless dot, Wake Island, barely 7.5 square kilometers. A lonely ring of coral halfway between Hawaii and the Marshall Islands. Yet to the eyes of strategists, it is anything but small. It is the key to the Pacific, a refueling point, an airfield stop, and the first defensive outpost standing between America and Asia. Over black and white footage, we see waves crashing, B-5Ns and G-3Ms screaming through the sky, and Pearl Harbor burning like an open wound. The world has entered a new age, one where war is no longer distant, but closing in by the mile. Wake, once the resting island of seabirds, has now become a lonely fortress. And through the haze of smoke, a quiet question lingers. How can a tiny island stand against an entire empire? The answer lies ahead. In 15 days of hell about to begin. As the smoke of Pearl Harbor had yet to clear, the world was beginning to understand. It wasn't just a raid. It was a declaration of war on the entire Pacific. And in the midst of that vast ocean, one tiny speck was about to become the eye of the storm, Wake Island. On the map, it was merely a slender coral ring barely 7.5 kilometers long, lying desolate between Hawaii and the Marshall Islands. But to military strategists, it was a rare gem, a vital link for flight routes, a refueling station, and the first chain in America's Pacific defense line. On the island stood just 524 Marines, 69 sailors, and over 1,100 civilian contractors. With 12 aging F-4F Wildcats struggling to turn coral sand into fortifications. No radar, no solid bunkers, no reinforcements behind them. Under the scorching Pacific sun, they worked, laughed, and believed the war was still far away. "We thought we were just guarding an anonymous reef," one man would later recall. But what they didn't know was that just beyond the horizon, the Imperial Japanese fleet had already set its sights on them. The calm of Wake was about to end. A tiny island would soon become a lonely fortress in a sea of fire. In the early days of December 1941, Wake Island drifted in a deceptive calm. Young Marines and civilian workers toiled under the blazing sun, convinced that the storm of war would never reach this lonely outpost. But on the night of December 7th, the radios crackled with a message that froze every heart. Pearl Harbor has been attacked. And just hours later, that nightmare crossed the ocean, straight toward Wake. At noon on December 8th, 1941, Wake time, the sky suddenly trembled. From the direction of the Marshall Islands, 36 Mitsubishi G3M Nell bombers appeared. A swarm of iron bees descending upon the small atoll, unleashing a torrent of bombs. With no radar warning and no time to scramble a defense, 8 of the 12 F-4F Wildcats were torn apart right on the runway. Flames roared, thick smoke billowed skyward, and within minutes, half of Wake's air power was gone. 23 pilots killed, 11 wounded. The survivors could only watch the burning wrecks glow red against the sand and understand that war had found them, merciless and without warning. By that same afternoon, the final civilian evacuation order was given. A Pan-American seaplane lifted off, carrying the last souls to escape a paradise collapsing into ruin. On Wake, only the Marines remained. A handful of Guam laborers, and a vow unspoken but firm: we will stay. From that moment on, Wake was no longer a dot in the middle of the Pacific. It had become the front line of hell. The smoke from December 8th had barely lifted when the men on Wake began to grasp the truth. They were on the front line of a hopeless war. They had no radar, no reinforcements, only grit and a few aging guns. Yet instead of despair, they chose something else: cunning and courage. From December 9th to 11th, the tiny island became a stage for audacious deception. At night, the Marines silently hauled their artillery to new positions, rebuilding their defenses and constructing fake gun emplacements out of wood and oil drums to fool the enemy. When daylight broke and Japanese bombers roared overhead, the ruse worked perfectly. The bombs fell on the decoys while the real guns remained hidden, silent, waiting for the right moment. Amid the fire and smoke, it was their first victory. Small, fleeting, but oh so sweet. But war is never merciful. A stray bomb struck the anti-aircraft ammunition depot, igniting tons of explosives and leveling an entire section of the island. Nearly all of their anti-aircraft shells were destroyed, the most painful blow since the first attack. Offshore, the submarine USS Triton was sent to strike the Japanese fleet, but all 4 torpedoes missed. Hope for rescue flickered like a lamp in a storm. Yet in the hearts of the men of Wake, the flame of resistance still burned bright. In the days following the first bombing, Wake Island lived under unrelenting tension. Each night, flares tore across the sky like open wounds, and every man knew, sooner or later, the enemy would come from the sea. On the night of December 10th, the waves were eerily calm, a silence that heralded the storm to come. At dawn on December 11th, 1941, dark silhouettes appeared on the horizon. It was the Japanese invasion fleet, the cruisers Yubari, Tenru, and Tatsuda, 6 destroyers, and 2 transports carrying more than 450 Imperial Marines. Japanese guns thundered first, churning the ocean into smoke and spray. But instead of panic, the American gunners waited. They held their fire until the enemy came within range. Then the 5-inch coastal guns on Wake roared to life. Within the first few salvos, the destroyer Hayate was hit and blown apart, erupting into a ball of flame amidst the waves. In the skies above, Captain Henry T. Elrod, one of the few surviving pilots of VMF 211, dove like a blade of steel, releasing a bomb squarely onto the destroyer Kisaragi. The explosion ripped the ship apart in seconds. In less than an hour, 2 Japanese warships had been annihilated. The first time Japan had been defeated at sea in World War II. The Japanese fleet withdrew, leaving more than 400 casualties behind. And across the other side of the Pacific, in a nation drowning in despair, a single headline ignited hope. Brilliant victory at Wake. In the darkness that followed Pearl Harbor, a small flame had begun to burn. After the dazzling victory of December 11th, Wake Island suddenly became a symbol of hope. But even as cheers echoed across the radio waves, the clouds of war were gathering once more. The Japanese would not accept defeat. They wanted revenge. From December 12th to 20th, Wake turned into a blazing red dot on the Imperial Air Force's bombing map. Every morning, the sky thundered with the engines of G-3M Nell and H-6K Mavis bombers. Every afternoon, the island lay shrouded in smoke and ash. The American gunners fought back with grim determination, shooting down a few attackers, but one by one the F-4F Wildcats fell. By week's end, only 2 aircraft remained airworthy, both patched together from the charred remains of their fallen comrades. Worse still, a U.S. radio broadcast accidentally revealed that Wake was a small outpost with no reinforcements. That message, once intercepted by the Japanese, became a death sentence for the men on the island. They knew now. They were completely exposed. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, an emergency rescue plan was hastily drawn. The carrier USS Saratoga, the transport Tangier, and a screen of destroyers were ordered to sail. Through the dark nights, Wake's operators could still catch faint radio signals from the east, a fragile sign that hope was still alive. But the question hung heavy over the surf. Would the rescue come in time? Before the darkness from the west closed in again? The relentless siege was bleeding Wake Island dry. Ammunition was running out. The aid station overflowed with wounded, and each morning, every man awoke with the same haunting question. Will today be the last? Yet even in despair, they clung to a single promise, the rescue from Hawaii. Saratoga is coming, they were told. What they didn't know was that across the ocean, Japan had intercepted that very message and was preparing to strike the final blow. On December 21st, 1941, the western sky suddenly flared with light. From a safe distance offshore, the aircraft carriers Hiryu and Soryu, the same that had ravaged Pearl Harbor, launched 49 aircraft. They swept toward Wake like a flock of steel hawks, raining bombs and bullets upon an island with nothing left to shield itself. Wake's Wildcats were gone, and the men could only hug the ground as explosions shook the sand around them. Amid the inferno, one last Wildcat managed to take off. Not to fight, but to search for the enemy fleet. It returned with nothing. The next morning, December 22nd, The final two pilots, Herbert Freller and Carl Davidson, still took to the air, knowing there would be no return. They plunged into the formation of zeros, fighting until the very last round. Both were shot down, but even their foes bowed in respect. "I honor them," a Japanese commander would later say. "They fought to the end, like true warriors." Over the skies of Wake, the flame of courage blazed and slowly faded into silence. After 2 relentless weeks of bombing, the final nightmare arrived. Before dawn on December 23, 1941, beneath a sky thick with darkness and a sea lit by flares, Wake Island erupted in the thunder of naval guns and the roar of landing craft engines. At 2:35 a.m., more than 900 Japanese troops stormed ashore from multiple directions. The full-scale invasion had begun. On Wilkes Island, Lieutenant Verblad waited in silence. When the enemy ships came within range, he gave the order to fire. The 3-inch coastal guns roared, turning 2 Japanese landing barges into blazing wrecks. But the human tide kept coming, wave after wave, unstoppable. The battle quickly devolved into brutal close-quarters combat. Inside the maze of bunkers and trenches, fire, smoke, and shouts merged into chaos. Captain Henry T. Elrod, the pilot who had once shot down enemy planes and sunk the destroyer Kisaragi, now fought on foot like an infantryman. As he rushed forward to protect his comrades hauling ammunition, he was struck and killed, becoming the first U.S. Marine officer to be posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in World War II. By 8:30 a.m., the ammunition was gone. The guns fell silent. Major Devereaux was forced to order a surrender to save the remaining men. After 15 days in hell, Wake Island went quiet. But that silence was not an ending. It was the prelude to an even darker tragedy, as the fate of the captured men now fell into enemy hands. As the gunfire faded over Wake Island, the air still reeked of gunpowder, and the charred remains of ships drifted across the coral. The battle was over, but the true tragedy had only just begun. Exhausted soldiers, their uniforms scorched and torn, emerged from their bunkers in silence. They had not lost out of cowardice, but because they had nothing left to fire. When the rising sun flag was raised over Wake, the tiny island officially fell into Japanese hands. 1,616 Americans were captured, including 1,100 civilian contractors. They were imprisoned under brutal conditions, left to suffer beneath the burning sun, haunted by the fear of execution at any moment. Yet the Japanese victory came at a terrible cost. 4 warships sunk, 28 aircraft destroyed, and hundreds of men killed. An enormous price for such a small strip of coral. But the horror did not end there. In 1943, fearing an American counterattack, the Japanese commander on the island ordered the execution of 98 remaining American prisoners, a barbaric act remembered as one of the enduring stains of the war. After Japan's surrender in 1945, Wake Island was returned to the United States, but the spirits of those who had fallen seemed to linger still, among the white sands and rusting steel. And from the darkness of that tragedy, one question still echoes. Can glory ever truly wash away the price of blood? When Wake Island returned to American hands in 1945, the survivors did not come home in triumph. They came home in silence. They had lost comrades, friends, and the best years of their youth on a strip of coral in the middle of the Pacific. Yet from that silence, another flame was kindled, the flame of memory and the spirit of defiance. Captain Henry T. Elrod, who had fought to his last breath, was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, becoming a symbol of Marine Corps courage. Every man who took part in the battle received the Wake Island Ribbon, a small decoration carrying immense meaning. It stood as a reminder that the true strength of a nation lies not in its fleets or guns, but in the will of those who stand firm when the world collapses around them. The story of Wake spread across America like a fresh wind after the disaster of Pearl Harbor, proof that Japan was not invincible. Hollywood soon immortalized the battle in the 1942 film Wake Island, turning that lonely outpost into the Alamo of the Pacific, a symbol of courage against impossible odds. And even today, Wake Island is more than just a name on a wartime map. It is an enduring reminder that, in the darkest of hours, humanity can still ignite the flame of courage, a light that never goes out.